Welcome into episode 23 of the Gym Podcast. Last week we talked about the idea of avoiding temptation, the importance of that, why we need to avoid temptation, and to have a strong enough why internally. And so this week we wanted to turn toward something that's not necessarily sinful, but I think we can say it's unwise, and that's the idea of youthful vices.
Yeah. Before we start, I just got to say, Joe is wearing that Nikola Jokic shirt 100%.
That's right.
Because there's a finals game happening tomorrow night. So I'm sure it's the good juju that you're trying to get going there.
Whatever will work. I wore this on game 3.
Okay, we don't have to talk about that, actually. So
and
we can
against the Lakers and LeBron.
We can just move on. We don't have to talk about that.
So it worked out.
Don't really want to hear about it. No, but we're on episode 23, too. That's LeBron's old number.
There you
anyway, so we wanted to talk about some things that are just... Yeah, youthful vices is the best way to put it. Things that young people are involved in a lot of times, and things that you can't really necessarily come down on and call them a sin. And there are some that we're going to talk about that people might go, I'm pretty sure that is a sin.
Yeah.
They're not. I mean, you're not with all these things that we're going to discuss. You can't say if you participate in it, you're going to hell.
Right.
However, they're unwise. They're things that young people should not be doing. And it's different than like what we talked about last week. Porn. Messing around with your girlfriend, language, all that stuff,
right.
Lusting. There's no debate. That is something that is wrong. That's an abomination to God. We can't be caught dead doing those things. This stuff, not so much. I guess, do we want to highlight all 5 or keep them guessing? What do you think? Let's keep them guessing.
Let's keep them guessing.
So I'll let you get us into this first one.
Yeah. Once again, to preface, your parents may watch this with you and go, I'm sorry, what? They're not saying that's a sin? No, we don't think so. And the first one is tattoos. We don't believe tattoos are a sin. Now, the older generation would probably yell at us and tell us how wrong we are because, of course, they very much feel like, of course, that's wrong. And they're going to jump to Leviticus 19:28.
Yeah, Leviticus 19:28 talks about you shall not tattoo any marks on yourself. Something about cutting your flesh for the dead. I'm the Lord or whatever. Yeah, you can't really use that to say that tattoos are wrong because right before it, he says, don't shave anything on the side of your head. I think he says disfigure your beard. Like, we never really look at that. Like, that's never something that gets bound, but all of a sudden we want to jump to the tattoo verse.
If you have a nice looking fade, you're in sin.
Luck. No, we never say that. Now, I want to be very clear. I think tattoos don't look very good. Like, I'm not a tattoo guy at all.
Neither am I.
I will never have one. I will encourage my kids. Please don't get one. I don't think they look good.
So why? Why wouldn't you encourage?
So I've actually got on the outline. They just look stupid. I'm not talking about. I know there's people that get tattoos for reasons. They lost a child, or some people get their wedding ring tattooed, or something like. There are. Okay reasons for tattoo. Like, I'm not really talking about those people when I say they look stupid, the ones that are maybe for a purpose. But let's face it, a lot of the tattoos you see, they just look so dumb. Yeah. Like, I had a guy that was, I'm closer to a younger guy, and I'm thinking about getting a tattoo. What do you think? I was like, I think that's the dumbest idea ever. Like, I think it's a terrible idea. So I'm not pro tattoo. And the reason is for that reason, but also just, I don't know, I feel like they make you look less. I take people less seriously when they have tattoos. I'll put it that way. And maybe you might look at that and say, well, Will, that's a you problem. I think statistics back up that employers do that as well. Oh, yeah. Like a lot of places of work require you, if your tattoo is, again, not one of the religious ones or the name of a kid or something, they have you cover it up. Like, they don't want the tattoo showing because it does give off an unserious look, I guess. And I know the tide is kind of turning on that, where tattoos are becoming more and more normal. That's fine. I'm not a big fan of it. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's kind of like going into a job interview with super greasy hair. It doesn't give the impression you're hoping for, right? It just doesn't. You're already having to cover it up or go. My dad owned his own business, and he had a guy one time come in and had a very graphic tattoo on his forearm and of a pretty serious topic. And my dad asked him, like, I gotta ask. What's the deal with that? And he said, I got it when I was young, and kind of one of those big regrets. And he said, does this come up in job interviews a lot? He's like, all the time.
Yeah, of course it does.
Of course it does. I mean, he's got this horrible thing right on his forearm. And the big thing for me, and the reason why I don't really believe in them, and why I will encourage my kids not to get it, this is for life. Like, few things are for life. Getting married should be for life. Having kids, obviously, you want them. You got to raise them up, but even that's not for. You raise them up until they leave the house. And yes, you're still a parent, but things change. This one doesn't.
Yeah.
So you better be real confident when you go to get that thing that it's gonna. The other thing is, not only does the tattoo usually look stupid, even when your skin is nice and stretched and it looks good, what happens when
When you're
SAG?
75, yeah.
There's a guy working at a hockey rink that I used to go to, and he had this tattoo on his forearm. It literally was a blob of black ink. You couldn't tell what it was. He got old, and it just like it doesn't come off. And yes, there are. Well, now we can laser it off. Okay, if you want to have something lasered off of your body, I guess go for it. But I would rather not.
Yeah, I'll pass on
I would
that,
rather not. So I just think, again, can we call it a sin to say you cannot get tattoos?
No, you can't. And the evidence for that, if anybody's watching, yes, it is a sin. Nobody is disfellowshipping anybody for having a tattoo.
That's right.
You either, if you truly believe that, then you have to, number one, demand that Christians with tattoos laser them off, or two, you have to say, all right, then you're disfellowshipped. And you're not going to do that. No, because it's not. It's just not. We don't think it's the wise in the world.
It's not wise. And just consider, I may want this today, but what I would encourage you to do, I would take a month, 3 months, 6 months. If you're thinking of getting one, let's say you're 18, 19, you're out on your own, you're like, hey, I can get a tattoo. Is this going to inhibit any potential prospects? Is this going to hurt getting a girl, religion, job opportunities, things like that? And do I still want it in 3 months? Do I still want it in 6 months the way I want it today?
It's like getting a new, I don't know, pair of shoes or something, or a new clothing item. It's really exciting. It's really cool to wear those shoes and to wear that clothing item for 3 weeks, and then after that you're kind of all right, ready for the next thing.
Well, I want this for forever.
You cannot wear the shoes. You can't not wear the tattoo.
That's exactly it. Where you get it placed and what you decide to get. So we just think it's unwise. That's number one. Get us into number two.
So number two, vaping. Youthful, for sure, a youthful vice these days. I mean, young people. I remember the first time that I was offered to take a hit, I guess, of a vape. I don't know what the kids are saying these days. Somebody tried to get me to vape with them, and I didn't know what it was. I was like, "What is that?" It looked way too close to drugs. So I was like, I think I was like 15. It's like I'm not doing that. So it's been around quite a while. And of course they're marketed like they're safer than cigarettes and don't smoke cigarettes, vape, e-cigarettes or whatever. This is very unwise. Again, can we call it a sin? We could actually get into an argument, or a discussion about our body being the temple, which in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, 19-20 talks about our body's the temple of the Holy Spirit. It's in a sexual context. It's not really talking about this, but I think there's maybe some applications we can draw from that we are to treat our bodies well. So I'll save that one for a second. When it comes to vaping, there are so many toxic chemicals that you are just putting in your lungs from vaping. That in and of itself is a reason that, I would advise even more strongly, like with my kids, and be like, hey, I really wouldn't get a tattoo. I'd advise you to not. With vaping, I'm going to no, you will not be vaping. Like, that's not an option. Not. And again, less because it's a sin and more just because it's so unhealthy.
And we can say, you could look at nicotine addiction and you're not supposed to be mastered by anything or sober. We could talk about some of those things. I mean, it is horrible for your body. Body's a temple. There's all those. But I've heard the other side of, well, it's just chemicals. It's not actual. It's not nicotine, which the Juuls are, and a lot of the ones that kids are smoking are Juuls, and they are nicotine based, which a lot of people don't know. But you can make the claim, oh, it's just chemicals, it just tastes good, whatever it is. Here's the problem: there are no long-term studies done on any of this stuff.
Because this is all right now.
You are the guinea pig. You are the studies.
Right.
So in a decade where you're dying of emphysema and you go, boy, that was a really bad idea, they're going to come out with all these studies. 92% of people who smoke. You don't know.
You don't say.
You don't know. I mean, nicotine's been around for quite some time. We do know the effects. We know it's very negative. We know it's very addictive. We don't know about this.
There are some stats on it. I don't know if you want to get into some of these.
Sure,
the one that I found, compared to non-smokers as far as e-cigarettes go, 34%, if you did vape and you did use e-cigarettes, you were 34% more likely to have a heart attack, 25% more likely to develop coronary artery disease, and 55% more likely to suffer from depression or anxiety. 55% more likely to suffer from depression.
That's not good.
That's not good at all. And so, look up the stats. I mean, and I actually did just prep. I just Googled it, like, is it worse than cigarettes? And basically all the articles said, no, it's not worse than cigarettes. It is slightly, I guess, better for you than cigarettes, but also the articles also didn't hide from the fact that it's not good for you. Right. And like you said, we don't have the long-term data to look at.
Yeah, exactly. We're shifting from cigarettes used to be the thing, right? Like our parents or grandparents, like that's you'll see the Fonz on Happy Days or something, and like smoking, which now I'm thinking about it. Does he smoke? I can't remember. But that look,
that was the rebellious thing
exactly.
to do
The James
then.
Dean, you smoke a cigarette. That's not the case these days. I'm not seeing a whole lot of 18-year-olds as you go out on campus looking at or as you go out on high school or whatever, smoking cigarettes. And now it's vaping because they look like, and the other thing is they look like little USBs. So a lot of parents are like, oh, the kid just got a USB in his backpack, not knowing.
I saw one that was like, it was shaped like a highlighter, like a school so they'll just stick it in their pen cup or whatever. And sure enough,
vape pens look, and you can sneak them into concerts and everything else. I mean, I've been around it a bunch and seen all sorts, and they are very fooling to parents, so they have no idea. But if it was something you were supposed to be doing, are you comfortable doing it in front of your parents?
And they are addicting. I mean, I think that is something we can safely say. Maybe it's not a sin, but you aren't to be mastered by anything. You don't want to get yourself caught in something that you're like, I can't really stop.
And 1 in 7, those are the other stats I meant to read, 1 in 7 high school kids are regularly using this. How many kids are not regularly using it but are getting talked into it, getting peer pressured into it, whatever, just to take the hit? And you might say, well, it's not addicting the way nicotine is. Granted, the oral fixation can certainly be addicting, and these chemicals I do think can be addicting, and the slight high you get from it certainly can be addicting.
And this is where, because I was going to ask, and we got to move on, but I was going to ask about the body as a temple thing. Because you hear that with people, talking about alcohol and, stuff like, they'll say, well, Cokes are bad for you, or,
Big Macs,
Big Macs are bad for you, so should you just not do those? What you just brought up about, the highly addictive nature, that to me is what separates it. Like, you can say Cokes are addicting, and some people, I guess, are have to have one every day. For the most part, they're not addicting. This stuff is, and that's what makes it different.
Yeah, it's very dangerous to your body. It's just unwise, and with all of these, as you'll see, and I was going to say this to the end, but really the question is, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
Do you really? I mean, is it done for because you just happen to enjoy it and you can do it once every 3 months? Still, don't do it, I would say. But even then, that's different. If it's for a peer pressure purpose, if the tattoos is because you think it's going to look cool and get you a higher status with some chick or whatever else, like, consider why you're doing these things. We think they're unwise. They may not be sinful. We think they're highly unwise.
Yeah.
And so you have to know your motives as to why you're willing to wade into something that is rather unwise and stupid. Know your motives. Third is gaming. We talk about highly addictive, right? And we say gaming, of course, we're talking video games, but gaming is a culture now. Like it is, and not even a subculture. Like it is a culture.
And I want to stop here because neither one of us have a tattoo. I've never vaped. I'm assuming you've never vaped.
I've never vaped.
We have played video games. Like this is somewhat different than the first two in the sense that we are not saying don't ever pick up a video game. In fact, in the last 2 episodes ago, we talked about the importance of sports and how it is objectively better to go out and play basketball than it is to play video games, and we believe that's true. Yeah. It's 100% what we believe. However, we're not saying it's wrong to play video games ever. We play video games with each other, and so this one's different than the others, but this one also can be just as addictive as vaping, and it can be really just as unwise if you find yourself always running to it. And I think that's what we're talking. Like, there is a difference in this is your go-to pastime. It's what you always want to be doing versus, I enjoy playing video games every now and then, just like a good movie, right? Yeah. If you're in front of a movie every single night, that's probably not great. But if you enjoy it every now and then and it's a nice escape for you, that's not a problem. I think that's the differentiating factor. But so many people these days, it's their go-to. It's their escape. It's what they always want to be doing.
There are a few markers of addiction. Of course, this goes across the board. And this is when we've stepped into this is really not good. This is more than just a habit. This is more than just a fun escape from stressors of school or life or whatever else. First, compulsivity. Do we feel it's compulsive? Like, I have to go home and play a game. Second, is there an increase in frequency and duration? All of a sudden, you go from playing a couple times a week to, I need to play like 5 times a week, 6 times. I'm every single day. I'm before school, after school, things like that. I'm playing for 6 hours at a time. And third is the inability to stop despite negative consequences. So you stayed up playing Fortnite or whatever the game is, or whatever the cool game is these days, Destiny, I don't know, until 2 a.m. You didn't get any of your studying done. You fail the test. But then you come right back to it.
You were late to work or whatever.
You were late to work, right? Yeah, exactly. You flunked out of college because you were playing too many video games. Those things happen. That's really unhealthy. You go, well, I haven't flunked out yet. I haven't not passed the test. That doesn't necessarily mean you're not addicted to it, but those certainly are markers of addiction. So just be aware of that. But I feel like this gives you a false or like a cheap sense of accomplishment. We talked about this before. And I think we talked about this in the sports one and in a few others of like, we do get a dopamine hit. We do get that rush of accomplishment when we beat the level. Yeah. That's the way these games are designed. They're designed to be addictive. So if you say, well, they're not addicting, they're doing it for a reason, because when you play a certain amount, then you end up doing the things that you can buy in the game. You buy the next game, the next game, the next game. So these companies make money based off of you getting addicted to these things. That's why it's very scary. Like, our relationship can turn sour with video games very quickly.
Think about the first time you ever put in a really, really hard day's work as a kid. Worked out on the farm, or did something that your first paying job. And you looked back on the day and you were like, man, you felt good, right? You accomplished something. You think about, when you worked your tail off to write that 8-page paper single-spaced, right? And, man, you maybe pulled an all-nighter. You did some serious research. You hit submit. You look back, man, you feel accomplished, right? You did something. Video games can give that, like you're saying, it's in a sense of accomplishment, but it's so fake. Yeah. It's so cheap. You didn't accomplish anything. You beat a video game. Like, it's I think all of us, especially as guys, crave that sense of accomplishment with work, sometimes with sports, with whatever it is. And so we get kind of the knockoff version, right? The cheap, fake version through video games. And so that's definitely something to be mindful of. Again, we're not trying to be the old men yelling at clouds, young people on their video games these days. That's not who we are. We just think there's so many more productive uses of time, and that's the last thing we have on here, is that there's just so many better ways to spend your time. Again, can it be used for leisure and just a nice Sure, absolutely. But, if you're playing video games instead of spending time with your wife, that ain't great. If you're spending time playing video games and not spending time with your family, if you haven't left the house yet, that's not great either.
I really feel like this wouldn't have been a thing, like, maybe a decade ago, maybe a little more. Like, you had the Halo parties. You had people that had the addiction for sure. It just wasn't super common. The reason we bring this up as a youthful vice today is because I personally know kids that stay pretty much in their parents' basement and play video games all day. Hours. In Japan, they have a name for it. I think we've talked about it before, but they have a specific name for guys who stay in their parents' basement and play video games. 3 million of them in Japan. They don't know what to do with these guys. They can't get them out. Like, it's a pandemic, and they don't know what to do with it because these guys are addicted to the game.
So it's so ironic, and then we'll move on. I was looking up just, cool things that happened since today's June 6th. On June 6, 1944, D-Day, the invasion of Normandy started. You know how many 17, 18-year-olds were involved in storming the beaches of Normandy on D-Day? And you get a lot of 17, 18-year-olds now. That was accomplishment right there.
Yeah.
I mean, you had a lot of those young men that passed away.
Oh, yeah.
You look back on after that day, if you survived that, obviously PTSD, all those things will be going through your mind. But, man, talk about feeling accomplishment. We got young people playing video games these days. Yeah. And so, again, we don't want to continue to talk. We're not anti. It's okay every now and then. Don't make it your escape, your go-to, your vice, really. The next one kind of ties into that, but it is still very different. Phone addiction. As far as a youthful vice, this is one I saw a stat the other day. We referenced it on Think Deeper. I actually wrote an article about it. On average, your 10 to 13-year-old demographic is spending 8 hours a day in front of a screen, not counting schoolwork.
Oh, my word.
So a lot of young people do their schoolwork on their computers or whatever now. It's not counting that. So outside of that,
8 hours.
8 hours a day on a screen. And this is one that is, it is so dangerous. It is so, because you think about kids are given tablets at 2 years old now.
Oh, yeah.
They're 2.5. And that's so,
Think about the neurological effects of that. I mean, just from a scientific perspective, it messes with your melatonin, it messes with your serotonin, it messes with a lot of natural brain chemicals that are intended to induce sleep and intended to induce calmness and everything else. And it either raises or lowers those levels to really unhealthy places. So from a brain perspective, being on a phone 8 hours a day, but I just think it takes you away from the world.
Yeah.
It takes you away from productivity. It takes you away from connection with others, from reading, from broadening your horizons, from doing things that you're going to be proud of. How many people spend, and I know it's more our generation probably that's on Twitter, the Twitter, the Reddit, the Instagram, things
now
like that.
YouTube and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And Snapchat and TikTok obviously are some of the newer ones and such. But or Chat GPT at this point, you can spend so long in the virtual world that you forget what it's like to live in the real world.
This is one that I'll be fully upfront with. I have struggled with this before of not knowing when to put the phone away.
Sure.
And it's real bad for me in the sports season when I'm wanting to get on Twitter and see, okay, what's everybody saying about the latest game, or Nikola Jokic being amazing, or I'm scrolling Twitter.
Sports World has a lot that to say about that.
Yeah, sure. And I'm sure it does. Yeah, finally he's actually doing something in the postseason. Go figure.
Hey, watch yourself.
So you've got that where it's so it's just everybody's go-to, right? I'm at a stoplight, pull my phone
yeah.
out. I'm waiting in a waiting room, pull my phone out.
At church.
Yeah.
In between, yeah.
This is something I've struggled with very much. And so I have to really keep myself in check.
Yep.
Not having that be the last thing my eyes are on when I'm going to sleep, right? This is something that, we're coming from a place of sympathy because it is difficult. But this is one that you got to be very. You brought up what all it keeps you from, and really think about that. If you're spending, even if you're not spending 8 hours a day, 4 hours a day, you spend 4 hours a day on your phone. What are those 4 hours, spent on your phone? What are you not doing with those 4 hours that you could be doing, but instead you're on your phone? And so I would encourage everybody watching this, just kind of take the evaluation, and the iPhones, of course, have the screen time app to tell you. How long per day are you spending on your phone?
And consider your attention span. Consider the fact
that's
that
a big one.
If you can't talk with somebody for 15 minutes without wanting to, you may have FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. You may just struggle with really short attention span. We want to start lengthening that. Those that accomplish things in life have an attention span longer than 5 minutes, or 5 seconds, and we have to just have something in our face. And so I think that's a big portion or a big part of this as well. I just think that it has such negative side effects to not live in the real world and to not really be checked in and to have to work on active listening and everything else because we're already thinking about what's on our phone. And we feel the buzz, and it's just constant dopamine rushes as well, especially if you're if you're on social media and you're getting dings right and left from likes and comments and everything else. There's such an addictive nature of I want to pull it out at all times and I want to see it. Instead, focus on putting that down. And what I would say is, maybe set some goals for yourself of I'm going to have a screen time that's below this amount
that's
or
great.
whatever it may be.
Another practical thing I would say, just have certain times where you're not going to pull it out at the dinner table. Don't pull it out.
That's right.
Especially you married guys, you're eating with your wife. Don't pull it out. Have times, I'm not going to be on it after 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. or you set the goal and you set the boundary and then you stick to it. I think that's really big because, again, we're not anti-cell phone. I've got an iPhone.
Not at all.
We're not anti-social media, but it's one of those things that if you let it run wild and you're completely unrestrained with it, you're probably going to fall into this vice, so this phone addiction of, always got to be binging YouTube, I always got to be watching Netflix, I always got to be playing an app or whatever.
Once again, it's not sinful. I can't tell you you're going to hell for that. I don't think we're going to hell for this. It's just extremely unwise, and what are we missing out on by doing it? So we're going to get into the last one, and this one we wrestled with what we wanted to title this portion of it. And I like what Will decided on, which is virtual promiscuity. Will, get us into that.
Yeah, so if you're young, you might be going, what is promiscuity? Basically being sexually immoral, kind of sleeping around with people. And so virtual promiscuity would be the idea of, and I have been around high schoolers that are like this. They are texting, they are Snapchatting, they are DMing,
flirting with
dozens of girls.
Oh yeah.
It's you see them, you just glance over and their Snapchat screen has got 20 different streaks going or whatever with various girls, and it's something that a lot of young men specifically, that's their bragging rights, right?
Exactly.
How many girls are you Snapchatting? Who are you talking to? And
they're not sleeping with them,
right?
So we can say, well, it's not sin per se. They're not even
messing around with them.
Yeah, maybe not even sexting. They're just, they got them all on the line,
all flirting with them.
They're ready to reel them in whenever they want, and I feel like that is. There's a specific name I don't think we're allowed to say on the podcast,
right?
For it.
Yeah,
but you are attention hogging, and you are seeking for attention from all of these girls.
Why do guys do it? Just because it boosts their ego.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. You want to feel like you're the guy that's liked by everybody, and so if I get, 1 is good, but if 1 is good, 10 is better, and if 10 is better, then 20 is great. Yeah. So you get on Snapchat, you get on Instagram, you get on TikTok, you get on all of these different places where you can go back and forth with them, and again, can I say you're sinning by talking with them? No, but be very careful. Be very aware.
It can certainly lead to sin.
That's exactly it. Very quickly, too. And this is the Godly Young Men podcast. Is it godly to have 20 young women on the line just waiting to give you compliments and everything else because, you're super cute, and you kind of texting these cute selfies and everything else? That's not what a man does. Godly young men. Not the emphasis on the young, the emphasis on the men. And that is a youthful vice for a reason. If you continue that into marriage, that's called adultery, emotional adultery, and that's a real problem.
That's the other thing. That's really hard to turn off
that's
because
exactly
you think about what that does when you're Snapchatting, dozens of people, and you're constantly obsessed with how many different girls you're talking to. it fosters an attitude of kind of discontentment and kind of an attitude of, I'm Snapchatting this really pretty girl, but there's a way more attractive one that if I could Snapchat her, that's who I would be. Right. You know what I mean? And so it kind of fosters the grass is greener somewhere else mindset. Yep. So if you have that from the time that you're 13 all the way till you're 21, and then you get married, you're just going to shut it off? Right. Like, oh, okay, I'm down to one person now. Probably not. Like, that's very difficult to do. And so you don't want to foster this attitude of constant discontentment, constant who's the hottest girl I can talk to, who's the most beautiful girl I can Snapchat, grass is greener over here. That's very unhealthy.
Well, it shows you have low self-esteem.
Yeah.
Is what it goes back to. You're trying to boost your self-esteem by who you talk to or who you're talking with, and that's the sign of somebody who, again, has very low self-esteem, ultimately.
Sure.
So we have to be aware of that. I mean, we really have to be aware of, like, why am I doing this? And once again, I come back to it for all of these. Why are we doing this? Why are these vices to begin with? Most of the time, we don't feel good enough in ourselves, and so we are getting tattoos so as to embolden ourselves or to make us feel tougher than we are. We are vaping because, that's the cool thing to do and it's going to get us liked by people. We're gaming because this is how we talk to friends, or this is where I can create my own avatar and be whoever I want to be. The phone addiction, we escape from the real world and from people actually knowing who we are. And so we can, again, online, we can present as whoever we want. Same thing with the virtual promiscuity of, like, we can present as whoever. We can present as this ultra suave kid who just is, cute and he's funny and he says all the right things. Right. And in reality, we need that because we don't feel good enough ourselves. We need more and more attention and love to tell us we're worthy of love because we don't feel it ourselves. So all of these vices really go back to our own inability to give it to ourselves.
Yeah.
To love ourselves and to just be okay with who we are.
And that you're not finding your value in God, finding your identity in God. And you think about the whole point of this podcast, to be godly young men.
That's right.
We have to have the ability to look at things like this and say, okay, maybe they're not a sin. Should we be involved in them? Is it wise for us to vape? Is it wise for us to Snapchat dozens of girls? Is it wise for us to constantly be on our phone? No, it's not wise. And so that's something that I want to encourage you, because we didn't cover the gauntlet here. We didn't cover everything there is to cover when it comes to youthful vices. If you've got something that maybe you're considering being involved in, something that you're doing, ask, what are the merits of it? Ask, is this something a godly young man should be involved in? Don't ask, well, is it a sin? Okay, awesome, then I'm going to go ahead and do it. Don't ask that. Ask, will it make you more Christ-like? We're not anti-fun. We're not anti-video games. We're not anti, Among Us or whatever the game was on there everybody was playing a few years ago now at this point. We're not anti-social media. We're not anti these things. But goodness, be very careful with them and make sure that you are striving to be Christ-like in all things. That's what we're asking for here. Anything else you'd add?
No, I think that's it. We're here. We're striving to be godly. That's all this is about, is, let's be godly in all of our vices. And yes, we chose the ones specifically that aren't sins to make that exact point. We could have gone into alcohol. We could have gone into other things. Yes, underage drinking is a sin. That's a problem.
Porn was another one. Like, these are vices. We realize, as you said, we're not covering the gauntlet, but these are ones we specifically chose that you can't point to and say, that's a sin. They're unwise. They're taking us away a lot of times from being the godly men that we can be. Yeah. And so, no, I think that's fantastic. So I think we're going to wrap right there. Good luck to your boy tomorrow night. Hope it, I don't know. I'm rooting for you. They knocked out my Lakers, but man, that's a bummer. But yeah, Nikola Jokic is really, really good. So good luck to the Nuggets.
Thank you.
I think we're going to wrap right there. We will be back as always. Hope everybody's having a really good summer so far. It's just getting rolling. But yeah, hope everybody will continue to let us know what feedback you have, what comments you have, if there's something maybe we left out that you'd like to add as far as, hey, you forgot this one. What do you guys think about this? We'll do episodes based on y'all's suggestions. So if you have something you're like, hey, would you guys cover this? Odds are we probably will. Yeah. So yeah, let us know what you think. But as always, we very much appreciate you listening, and we'll be back next week with another episode of the Godly Young Men Podcast. Thanks for watching.